Well, there you go, folks. It's 7 o'clock in Queensland, and in Tasmania, it's 8 o'clock, where our guest is currently domiciled. And of course, my co-host in the UK, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, so she's managed to get out of bed after Cyclone Eunice has just gone through the UK, causing reprehensible damage and knocking out the internet. So she's had to go and find a new location for today's show. So, Andrena, would you like to introduce us?
Right. Good morning, everybody. Good day, or wherever you are in the world. Welcome. And if you're listening to the replays, it's my pleasure and honor to have Barbara Russell on the show, who I've listened to her talking in the Kanyini group back along. And it was so lovely, the story that she's sharing of herself and Uncle Bob Randall, how they met, how the grannies come through, and the passing of the Kanyini wisdom. So this is going to be quite mixed because it's going to be about Uncle Bob, it's going to be about you, and it's about the teachings that you'd love to share with the world. So where would you like to start? I know you were born in America, so maybe you'd like to give us some background on where you were in life and what you've been up to.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Andrena. Thank you. I might just start with an acknowledgement. It's customary in this country of Australia, where I'm a permanent visitor, it seems, to acknowledge with great respect and humility the past, the present, and the future traditional custodians and the elders who have always kept the land and the water and the communities and the culture throughout this continent. And that's, of course, where I'm speaking from. So I just want to acknowledge them and the ancient and continuing connections to country and the continuation of the cultural, the spiritual, and all of the educational practices of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Thank you for that.
It's a beautiful culture here that should be acknowledged. Where to start? Oh goodness. Well,
good question.
Here I am, a citizen now of Australia, and I might just start with the story of how I came to be here. It was an unexpected turn in my life, but much of my life was quite unexpected. So I was born and raised in Connecticut, which is a New England state in the northeast of America, near New York, just a couple hours drive from New York. I had a lot of family in New York because my both sets of grandparents were immigrants that came to the United States from Russia and also from Puerto Rico. So at any rate, I was born and raised in a family that was the focus of the family was a place called the Waterford Country School. So I was born on several hundred acres of a residential treatment center for children with special needs. And that was my family throughout my early life until I was old enough to leave home, which I did at about 19, I think. Waterford Country School is still in existence. It's an extraordinary community school, summer camp, and facility for children with special needs. And it was started by my grandmother in 1922. And that was the year that my father was born. So she taught in her home in Brooklyn, she taught exceptional children and was able to accomplish in 1 year what 2 or 3 years of traditional school could be. And neighbors in that time, in that era, that was a time when there were children with special needs, mental retardation, and different, what they used to use the word disability. I don't know what the word is now, but children with special needs at that time who were mentally handicapped had the choice of either being put into an asylum or kept at home, hidden away from people. And when neighbors saw that my grandmother was teaching children, they approached her and said, "Would you teach my children, my child?" And of course, she never turned a child away. And then the neighbors started to see these different children coming into the house and ended up taking her to court, objecting. 17 times they took her to court, and 17 times she fought it and she won. And
Wow.
long story short, so she started that school the year my father was born, because as a teacher, she had to homeschool him because he had severe asthma. And at any rate, after 17 journeys to court, they ended up in Connecticut. They found 500 acres in Connecticut and bought this beautiful place that was set in nature, and that became the Waterford Country School and Camp Kuhika. And Kuhika stands for Culture and Health Camp. Fast forward 100 years. This year is the 100th anniversary. They're having a very big celebration because the school is still in existence and my family is still involved in the school and the summer camp. And they have, many years ago, they partnered with Cornell University, who developed a research evidence-based program, which they call CARE, C-A-R-E. Now, I don't know what the acronym is for what CARE represents, but it is about care. And then fast forward in my life, I think I was 52 when I came to Australia. I ended up meeting and marrying an Aboriginal elder who had developed a framework for teaching the traditional spiritual philosophy of an ancient culture, which is based in the teachings of something called Kanyini. And the word Kanyini means to care for. So, in essence, there are so many parallels between these two ways of being. One that just naturally emanated through my family and the legacy of my family, and the other an actual ancient way of being here in Australia. That is, it's basically a sacred law, this way of being, and it's all about caring to the level of having unconditional love with responsibility for self. So these two ways of being came together quite naturally and comfortably for me in some ways, and I believe it was a destiny for me to come.
Would you share your story before you fast track on about the work and that you're doing? How you met, because that's a really fascinating story. I think it's lovely, and we all love a good story.
Yeah. Well, I was in America at I think it was 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. I ended up coming to Australia for the birth of my my second grandchild, or my first granddaughter, I think it was. And I was just in the midst of going through a divorce. Oh, hang on. I've jumped ahead of myself. The first thing that happened was I was in the midst of marriage breaking up after 22 years, which was, for anyone who's ever done that, that's a pretty big journey. And I came to Perth, where my daughter had come. She had married an Australian man. She had studied abroad. at university, and she met and married an Australian man. And when they had their first baby, I came for his first birthday. I'd come before that, but I came again for his first birthday. And I stayed for 5 weeks in Perth. And the day before I left, I got woken up by a voice, basically, that said, you need to go to the didgeridoo breath shop. You're going to meet someone there to collaborate with. Now, the backside of this story was that several things had happened in my life that set the stage for me to be in that position. So at the time, I had a very bizarre turn of fate where I ended up working with a sound healer. And I had so many knowings in that work. I really thought that was going to be my life work. It felt so spirit driven, and it was. But that was the reason that I felt driven to find a didgeridoo player, because in the sound healing, it felt to me like what we really needed to do in the world was to connect the web, so to speak. And I thought no better way to do it than through music. So what if you brought this ancient African sound healing technique together with an ancient Australian way of healing? And so I get woken up by this voice that says, you need to go to Fremantle, to the didgeridoo breath shop. You're going to meet someone there to collaborate with. And so I ended up going, and I met a man who became a friend. I did have that was the day before I flew back to America. And he ended up telling me that he'd been invited to play the didgeridoo at the opening of a film that was coming to Perth. And the name of the film was called Kanyini. And so he talked to me about this film and about Uncle Bob Randall, this elder, and encouraged me to have a look at the film. So I went online and I ordered the film. And when I watched it, I was so absolutely blown away by the eloquence of this spiritual philosophy and by the man who shared it, that I picked up the phone and I called the number on the website for the Kanyini film. And I spoke with the producer and said, this man needs to be on Oprah with the Dalai Lama. This is the answer to world peace. You know, the West needs these teachings. You need to bring this film to the West. And, you know, she wasn't very receptive to that suggestion. So I said, well, I can't know what I know and do nothing. I'm going to show this to everyone I know. Simply feeling the importance of the access to wisdom, the access to a way of being that to me felt like coming home. So at any rate, in my one little PAL format DVD, which doesn't play in my DVD player at home or anything, I could only play it in my computer. And in the middle of divorcing and dissolving an estate, I started sharing this film with everyone I knew. And I would take my computer with me everywhere, and I would show it to anyone who wanted to see it. And I would sit with them and I'd watch it with them. So I watched it and showed it literally hundreds of times. And I ended up buying a set of speakers and a projector, because groups started to form. People would watch it and they'd say, oh, my church group would want to see this. Oh, my gardening group or my environmental group or whatever it was. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm having dreams and I'm having, you know, to me, this spiritual philosophy was as clean and as pure as anything I had ever heard. And it really just captured what I thought was the truth of what it meant to be human, what it's supposed to mean to be human, the truth and the beauty and the joy and the heart of service and everything that I grew up with, really, which was the love. It was the love, the connection, the all-inclusiveness, the caring. Everything was in the spiritual philosophy of Kanyini that I had always known. But what
Hey, can
had
I just stop you
happened?
there? Can I just stop you?
Yep.
Hey, can you
Yep.
put that light on now?
Put a what?
Put your light
Light.
on. Yeah. You're starting to get a bit dark there. Yeah, Tasmania's.
How's that?
Very good.
So I've had to drive 30 minutes to a little town to get Wi-Fi, so I'm sitting in my truck. That's this.
A high five,
So
baby.
there you go. So where was I? So I'm showing the film to everyone. It's the same philosophy. At any
Got a
rate,
projector? Got the projector?
oh, I got a projector. Groups started to form, and people would say to me, you know, what do we do? What do we do? There's genocide happening in Australia, and you know why? And I did ask the producer, you know, why have I been to Australia so many times as a visitor, as a tourist, and gone to all the places, even Uluru, and I never knew anything or learned anything about the spiritual philosophy of this exquisite culture to the level that I have learned in this one film from this one man. Why is genocide happening, and why is this understanding not shared with the world? And of course, there was no answer to that. That was a simple answer, except that I had also, I'll just backtrack a little. So in the latter years of my life, I began to feel unsettled about the meaning of life, the whole existential view. And so I started studying things like yoga and meditation and different healing arts. And I had a huge variety of experience, because I thought, I was really wondering, you know, where is the love? You know, that Black Eyed Peas song, that beautiful song, Where's the Love? That was like my theme song. Where's the love? Where is it really? Because I grew up with that love, where children were included in everything, where no matter what your difference, no matter what your mental, physical, or whatever difference and uniqueness, everybody belonged. The motto of Waterford Country School at that time was where everybody is somebody. And it's still that today, and it can be that everywhere in the world. And so I was very much wondering, when I left home at the age of 19, where's the love? And so I ended up, after years of study, different types of study, I realized, hang on, what have I done in the most subtle ways to contribute to love, to live it, to be it? And so I decided, maybe it's time to not be a student anymore. Maybe it's time to live it. And I took a vow for myself that I would only connect and contribute to that which was of truth and love. That was my vow to myself. This is my responsibility. I will only contribute to that which is of truth and love. And so when, after about a year and a half of showing this film, I ended up coming to Australia for the birth of a second baby. The divorce was final. My daughter said, Mom, why don't you come and get your spirit back? I could really use your help with this baby. And so I did. In September of 2008, September 17th, I flew to Australia. And 2 months later, the didgeridoo player said to me, guess who's coming to town? And Bob Randall apparently was on the board of the healing center where the didgeridoo player worked, because he used the didge for healing. So at any rate, I signed up for the workshop. Now, in the meantime, the didge player had said to me, oh, you should call Uncle Bob, tell him you're showing the film, tell him what you're doing, he'll love it. And I thought, well, why would I do that? this isn't about me, you know, it's just has nothing to do with me. So at any rate, I wake up the morning of the workshop. Now, I had studied all kinds of healing arts and felt all kinds of whatever. I'm sure everybody has unique experiences with energy and vibration and all those things. But for me, when I woke up that morning, I felt like something was radically different because it felt to me like I had champagne in my blood vessels.
Wow.
And I am not a groupie. I'm not a, ooh, Bob Randall. There was something energetically very, very unique and strong. And I was very hot. And I'm not usually hot. I'm usually cold. And so I go to this workshop and I sit down at a table and we're waiting for the workshop to start. And I can feel as if it felt like there was a tractor beam between me and Bob. I don't know how else to describe it. If you can imagine a tractor beam of light, that's what it felt like.
Wow.
And after a short time, he came walking over to our table. He was greeted by the didge player who knew him and Julian. And Julian jumps up. Oh, Uncle Bob, it's so lovely to see you. Look, I brought all these crystals to show you so you could feel the energy in them. And Bob just kept his hands in his pockets and didn't accept the stones that Julian was offering. And so then he looks at me and I look over at him and he makes a motion like this. Come on over here. And of course, you know, nonverbal communication is very, very common in traditional culture here. But that's kind of universal. So I got up and I walked.
That do. Oi, get over here.
That's right. But I walked over to Bob and he gave me a big hug to greet me. And then I felt him kind of quiver and make this little sound. And we leaned back and I looked in his eyes and he's got tears streaming down his face and he's smiling at me. And then he held me again and he says to me, I've been waiting for you.
Beautiful.
So I'm thinking, you know, a zillion thoughts as any woman would think, you know, because that's a really good line. I've been waiting for you. And I had really not had experience in the world of dating or anything like that. But you know, I'm scanning. Is this of truth and love? I'm always scanning at this point in my life. And he says to me, can we sit down? There's something very important I need to tell you. And we sit down at two chairs facing each other. And he leans forward and he's still got tears streaming down his face. And he's smiling. And he says, there's something very important I need to tell you. When I held you, the grannies came. And in my culture, granny's law is highest law. We never question the grannies. And then he says to me, grannies meaning, and he told me later, the spirits of his dead mother, his grandmother, and his wife who had predeceased him appeared to him. And he knew just like that they had sent me. And there were so many things, little aspects of this story that without a doubt, I have absolutely no doubt that was the case. So then he says to me, now, baby, I'm from Arnhem Land. I'm a straight shooter. I don't muck around. I get straight to the point. Are you married? So I said, and I actually like straight up. You know, when you grow up with children with mental retardation, there's no such thing as sarcasm or joking. Everything's real.
That's true.
Everything is in such real truth. It's fun. It's joyful, but it's truth and straight up. And so I always felt comfortable with that. But again, I'm scanning as any woman would. And I said, no, I'm divorced. He says, are you really divorced? I said, yeah, I'm really divorced. And he said, well, I'd like to get to know you while I'm here. Would you come to my teaching events? I'll be here for the week. And I've got a big lineup of things. And I said, sure, I'd love to. So he gets my phone number and contact details, email probably. And then the workshop starts. And I really don't think much of it, although I'm still effervescing. And the next thing I know, his girlfriend arrives at the workshop.
Oh.
And I didn't think anything of it. I had no illicit intentions. And I'm, at this point, I'm very, you could say, spiritually driven in terms of the purpose of my life and to serve the world, or whatever you want to call it. But at any rate, the girlfriend arrives, and no sooner is she introduced to everyone than Bob's phone rings, and he makes an announcement to the world that her daughter has gone into premature labor in Melbourne, and she needs to get on a plane and leave immediately. And that's when I said, you're not kidding. So a baby brought me to Perth, and another baby cleared the way.
Amazing, how the universe works.
And look, in Aboriginal culture, it was very, how shall I say, it's very natural for life to change, including relationships. And so as it turned out, the reason he said to me, are you really divorced, is because his girlfriend, he found out, wasn't. And so at any rate, that's how it all unfolded. That's how we met. And
well, it's such a beautiful short story, and I just wanted you to share it because it's, like I said, it's lovely to hear something different. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that, but carry on.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'll tell you what, can you put that other light that you showed me before we went on?
Oh, it's on. Let's see if I can, maybe, I don't know where I can put it that it will, is that better?
No, it's just got
rays.
Yeah. But didn't you have one at the top of the roof?
It's on.
Okay. It's on. Bring that one that you've got over on your left that you're holding. Can you just put that down, bring it down again to where you were? Just bring it up closer. Yeah, that's probably better. Let's go with that, eh? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just hold it in the air.
Oh, you can bring it down. No, bring it down.
It's like camping.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It's a bit like camping.
Whatever's comfortable for you, but I just wanted to.
No, that's totally fine.
Okay. Thank you. Next story. Bob. So, well, I suppose in those days you didn't need to use Tinder or any of these social dating apps. He was straight on the hunt, wasn't he?
Oh, look,
my grandma's going to come back. He's got you.
I don't know that he was on the hunt. I think that there was such a destiny.
Yeah.
And look, there were things that he shared with me that made it clear that he recognized me, shall we say.
Yeah, for sure.
I had been told by an astrologer. My best friend in America, she was a psychic by trade. She is a psychic by trade. And my life was so crazy toward the end, working with the sound healer. And, I had been married to a pathologist for 22 years. So that's a very conventional kind of a culture in some ways. But he was not that conventional. He was beautiful. He is a beautiful man. But my life was so crazy the way it unfolded. My friend said to me, I just sat next to this astrologer, Larry Martin, and he was really good at this festival. He was in the booth next to me. I think your life is so crazy. I think you should go have a session with him. And so I booked 3 readings with Larry, and I only had 2 because he spent 5 hours with me twice.
Oh my God.
And Larry said, he said, I put your chart on my piano because there was something about it I just didn't get. And I'd walk past it because, and he apparently taught astrology. He said, if I gave this to any of my students, it would just be a ho-hum kind of a life or chart or whatever his language was. He said, but one day the penny dropped and I got the whole thing. And he spent 5 hours with me. And one of the things he said to me was, oh, by the way, there's a partner waiting for you. And I said, well, really? When am I supposed to meet this partner? Because I was very, I'd had 2 marriages already. I wasn't, I actually, in my life, both of my marriages were found for me rather than the other way around. I never chased after a relationship. They found me. And so I wasn't looking for a relationship after my divorce. And he said, he looked at the chart and he said, oh, by the second week in December. And or maybe the first week, I can't remember now. At any rate, Bob and I met November 25th. And Larry had a lot of things to say. I'd have to listen to the recording because I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. But he did look at the map when he did the reading. And this was maybe 5-6 months before I came to Australia for my granddaughter. He looked at the map. He said, Barbara, I looked all over America for a place, you know, in this astrocartology science of location where you would be supported in your life work. And he said, there, you know, maybe you could go to Colorado, but it wouldn't be that great. Definitely don't go to the East Coast. So I looked at the world map, and there's one line where you should go, and it goes through Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, and Perth, Australia. And I said, well, Larry, I'm going to Perth in September. And he's very matter-of-factly said, oh, well, perfect. So, you know, that was one little thing. Another little thing, years before my daughter ever even thought of coming to Australia, I was at a yoga teacher training in Nashville, Tennessee with a friend, and we were on a walk in a garden. And out of my mouth, I said, look, there's a dingo.
Yeah.
Now, I've never been to Australia, ever. I never wanted to come to Australia. I didn't have any, you know, motivation. It was a fawn. A spotted fawn came out of the bush in this botanical garden and ran straight toward us, came right up to us. But out of my mouth, look, it's a dingo.
Wow.
And then the other bizarre thing that I remember is when my daughter was in high school, which was long before she came to Australia as a student. And my vet had these beautiful pastel paintings of animals, and I've always loved animals. And so I went to the shopping mall to buy a couple of prints. And I ended up choosing a koala and a white tiger. And they hung side by side, right? These big prints. Why I would do that, who knows? Except that, fast forward, my daughter comes to Australia, meets her future husband in koala country, and he is obsessed with white tigers. So
I was going to say synchronicity as its best, eh?
I think it's all fun. I think spirit has a great sense of humor, and I think everything is you know, there's no 2 moments alike. Nothing is the same ever, again and again. It's all new in every moment, and the creativity, the creative energy of life, it's limitless. And the way spirit puts these little things in there, what would happen if we all really paid attention? Wouldn't it be phenomenal?
Gosh, I'll say. Yeah.
So you know, there were hints along the way, but what ended up happening was, I'm telling you, our life took off like a shot. So November 25th, I spent the week with Bob. It was absolutely amazing. The things that happened. The what can I say? He such a beautiful human being with a heart of that was devoted, you know, at a stage in his life where he could see so much destruction, not only in Australia, but around the world, because he watched the world news. And it was so contrary to the way he was raised in the first 8 years of his life before he was stolen, because he was stolen generation.
Mm.
And that sort of heart of service was exactly the same in the family of origin where I was raised. The devotion to nature, to children, to human beings, to, you know, to goodness. It was amazing in that week. And so he left, he flew back to Uluru, and then he asked me to come to fly to Uluru, because I was living in Perth with my daughter on a 1-year visa. He asked me to fly to Uluru in January. So I did. I think it was the 8th of January. I flew to Uluru, and I stayed a week, and he drove me up to Alice Spring to meet all of the children that lived there, because he had 6 biological children and many, many more in Aboriginal way. But he had a couple of children, I think 3, who lived in Alice Spring. He drove me up there to meet them. And then on the way home, he said, just pull off the road right here on this little dirt track. And so we're about 10 Ks out of Yulara, the resort near Uluru. And I'm driving this 4-wheel drive Prado with the stick shift in my left hand, which I'm very clumsy with. I was so dizzy from the changes in my life. I was completely ungrounded. Everything in Australia is spinning, you know, counterclockwise, including me. And I pull off the road, and I forget I'm in a standard shift truck, and I forget to put the clutch in, and we start jerking, and we come to a halt, and in his usual very calm way, he looked at me with so much incredulous expression. He said, "What happened?" He just couldn't imagine somebody doing this. But at any rate, it had to be at least a 40-degree day. It was so hot that day. And I probably saw Bob with a fly net on his face maybe 3 times in my whole life. And we got out of the truck, and he put a fly net on because the flies were unbelievably thick, and it was so hot. And I was probably dehydrated. And he takes me to this little place, and he says, "I just want to show you One Tree Hill." And so we make our way up this really hot, slippery sand hill with hardly any vegetation on it. And the sun is blazing down. I've never spent time in the desert before. This is completely foreign to me. And here I am with this crazy cowboy who's been driving all through the desert on things that didn't look like tracks to me. And he always knew where he was going, because he showed me like all of his homeland on the way down. So we end up like I am huffing and puffing getting to the top of this little tiny sand hill. And as we get to the top, he says, "Now look around. Now there's the one tree. It's a milkwood tree." And first he says, "Now look at these roots." He said, "This poor tree, it's lost all of the soil around its roots. I want to get some buckets and just take some sand and give it back to the roots of this tree." And I'm listening to this man with so much compassion who cares about this little tree on the top of a sand hill in the middle of who knows where. He knew where. and with so much compassion. And then he says, now look around, spin around. And so I stood there and I spun 360 degrees. And when I did, it was like I corkscrewed into the earth. And for the first time, I was on the land in Australia. I happened to be in the very heart of the desert. But there I was, and I really landed. And then he said, now look over there. And I see Uluru and Katajuta, and he's standing next to this old, gnarly, twisted, like craggy bark tree. And I see Uluru and Katajuta in perfect, like, triangle relationship with this ancient tree and this man that feels so one with this tree. And I was thinking, you know, when you have knowings and it's as if, you know, it's not a linear thought like a chapter. It's this whole knowing all at once that you just have it. And in that moment, this is what happened. And I felt like this is the most powerful place I've ever been on the planet. This is an extraordinary moment. Here is this ancient tree, which is so one with this ancient man, and the earth literally being taken out from both of them, from under their feet. Mm. And so much compassion, so much humility, so much beauty. And they're eye to eye with these two great monoliths. And because I'd been to Uluru and Katajuta, because he had taken me, I'd seen all these tourists, you know, who have in some ways, you know, the commercial aspect of these great sacred sites, it can't be missed. You can feel it. There's a commercial aspect to it. It's been turned into an industry almost. And I'm thinking that this man and this tree, they hold their own with these two great, incredible sacred sites that everyone's flocking to, but look how much we're missing in the little sandhills. And in that moment, when I'm having all of these thoughts, he says to me, will you marry me? And I knew. And I said yes. And that was January. We'd met in November, late November. So imagine what a crazy thing to do. And at any rate, I flew back to Perth, and then I came back. He asked me to come back to travel with him. He'd been invited to a tea at Parliament House for the first anniversary of Sorry Day. Now, I was new to Australia. I learned what Sorry Day was, but I didn't have any of this in my bones or in my orientation or indoctrination, whatever you want to call it. So in February, I think it was the 13th, if I remember correctly, we flew to Canberra. And this is basically my first outing as his wife. Because in his way, it was a done deal. That's it. You're married tribal way. And so my first outing is straight to Parliament House. And the night before we get there, we meet with his niece. And she says, oh, Uncle Bob, you know, she's the head of the Aboriginal, I don't know if it was Torres Strait Islander, but the Sorry Day committee, the Aboriginal head. And she's in tears. And she breaks down with him and she says, oh, Uncle Bob, it's not right. They're not doing this and they're not doing that. And I don't remember the details of what she said, but she was so disappointed with the way the sorry was being handled. And he looks at her and he says, that's all right, my baby. I'm here for my people. We just won't go. So he had been invited to this private tea in Parliament House, and I'm thinking to myself, oh gosh, I hope I saved the receipt for that dress and then those shoes I had to buy. Which I did, but we ended up attending an event on the lawn, and there were all the politicians who were the who's who. I remember some, but so that was our first outing, and then we flew straight from there to Mullumbimby and Byron, where he screened the Kanyini film, and he was the honored guest at a 300 and something acre estate that had set up the biggest tent, and so many people were there. It was like another Parliament House, only with a different culture of people. It was amazing. But then here's what happened. So after, I think it was 2 weeks of unbelievable events, one after another, heaps of teaching events and meetings and all kinds of things, meeting beautiful people, Bob is asked to, the day before he leaves, to go on a horse ride with a little 8-year-old, the daughter of a dear friend who had brought him to Byron. And as a very experienced rider, he ended up breaking his pelvis on the horse.
Oh.
Now, they brought the horses off trail. I think he was on a very jittery horse. The horse stumbled on a very steep hill, and so he wouldn't go over the head of the horse. He throws his legs out in a wide V, and his pelvic floor hits the horn of the saddle, and he separates the pubic symphysis.
Oh my gosh.
And in effect, he broke his hip and lost all the stability of his pelvis. Now, I wasn't riding with him. I don't ride. So I was walking through the woods when he came riding up, and he says, I need to go home. And just as he came riding up, how on earth he did it, I don't know, but he got off the horse, and a car comes by on this dirt track out of nowhere and drove him back to the farm where we were staying. And long story short, when he was diagnosed, I couldn't fly back to Perth and leave him because he couldn't ambulate, he couldn't sit up, he couldn't take his meds, he couldn't do anything. So I ended up flying back to Uluru to stay with him and look after him instead of going back to Perth to be with my daughter, because I had told her I'd come and help her with this baby. And so
Yeah.
so he literally broke his pelvis to keep me.
And he was the
That's
baby
what happened.
to look after, eh?
Now then, did you want us to play that little 7-minute YouTube, or just?
I think that would be great.
It goes for 7 minutes, folks. So even if we play it for a couple of minutes, just to give people, and I'll put the link there, and they can watch it later on.
Yeah, I might just. Can I just say a couple of things about it? So I think we were in Sydney when that happened, and we were traveling with a friend, a visitor from America. We had visitors almost every day of the year at Uluru, at our home at Mutitjulu. And Bob would sit and teach individuals or groups or whatever it was. At any rate, a young woman from America, lovely woman, just very spontaneously started to interview Bob. So all of this was not planned. It was off the cuff. And this is one of my favorite videos that he has done, because it speaks to, I think, every single human being on the planet in terms of how do we manage the challenges? How do we live the love? How do we manage our emotions?
All right.
can hardly see you now, Barbara.
You can hardly see me.
Yeah, you're really in the dark. I can't hear anything, Jeff. Can you?
I can't. I don't know what to do.
Right, can you hear the sound, Barbara?
No, I can't.
Jeff, we can't hear the sound.
Okay. Carry on talking, girls, and then I'll
I got the sun pouring in over here, and you're holding your little your little light.
I don't know what else to do.
Well, at least we can see you now.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, okay. So I
I
sadly
see.
passed
I
away in
see.
2015.
Yes.
Sorry, Jeff?
I've worked out what's going on. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Stand by. Sorry about that. Oops, that's not the one we wanted. Oh, that's right. Add to the stream. Here we go. Okay.
So, Uncle Bob, how did you get from that broken place of Walcha, Ngura, Kurumpa, Chokapa, Cut to the place that you are now?
That's an amazing question because it's so real. We all need a starting point, and I think my starting point was remembering my childhood, where I was raised by four mothers. And just imagine the love of your single mother may have given you and may not have given you, and then multiply that by four sisters. Because in our system, my mother's sisters are my mothers, my father's brothers are my fathers. And when you raise as a child with that kind of relationship with other humans who are your caretakers, you can't help but be immersed in 24 hours a day of unconditional love. A love that is beyond, it has no limit. But when I was taken away, I was broken away from that for a while, and I was floating in space, and I became dependent on the emotions of the human. The emotion of human has its value. Being angry quite often can protect you by being able to yell back or defend yourself. But being angry can also have you killed. But having unconditional love for it is an energy that encompasses beyond those human emotions. And it must come a place, which I would refer to today, looking at it and remembering from the heart, from the mind of the heart, from the heart of the mind. It is from that space we all need to go back to this. Once you make a decision, it's like a born-again Christian. You can verbally state, I love you, Jesus. I want to do the right thing by you. And I've seen that happen many times. But they're only short-term to say, stay at the words. What you need to go into is your moment by moment, seconds by second of living the love. It must be so much part of you that you cannot exist without it. And I think my luck was that I was given it so much that I could recognize it and knew how to go back home to that love because I was raised, immersed in it. And my sisters and other auntie stories was always that you were so well loved by your people that your feet never ever touch the ground. If one pair of arms put you down, another pair would pick you up and play with you and tickle you. The inner love coming from the inner part of your soul, which is the pureness of what you were born with, and which every one of us has a right to know you by. That's it, and you cannot switch that on and off. It must be a part of you. Every second of your being, that love must be a reality. It must be a part of you. And it doesn't stop you from being angry. It mustn't stop you from being human in the many ways humans do, but don't let it get you down. Don't get stuck with the humanness. go back to the purity of what you brought into this planet.
Mm. Hello?
Are we frozen?
It looks like it.
You and I aren't frozen.
No. Glad to hear it, eh? Yeah, that's so powerful, and it is all about loving one another and respect for the land. More and more, we need to honor that and be love, reflect love, and regardless of all what's going on around us, and like we've all been challenged, with the different situations. But is staying in your heart and not reacting to everything that's going on, just keeping your center all the time is it's the most powerful thing you can do, isn't it? So you're carrying on the the teachings. Are we moving on? Where are we going with this now? Because we've seen the beautiful video, and I know you're doing so many things, Bob's work and your own work, aren't you? So
Well, I think, yes, I would say. I mean, I'm a unique, I'm my own being, my own person. So yes, it is Bob's work, but we're on the same page in terms of the philosophy of the work and the reason for bringing it forward. And what's coming to mind is an elder, a Cherokee elder that we had the great privilege of spending some time with, Grandmother Redleaf, in North Carolina in America. And she said to me at one point, "There is no new medicine." Now, I don't think there's a human being alive, really, who isn't aware that it's a changing world. And the number of challenges of just navigating life. No one is immune to these challenges now. And so, in the words of David Attenborough, we have a tremendous amount of knowledge and science. What we need now is wisdom.
Mm.
Now, some of my my current connections, relationships are with some people who are globally connected. And one of these people is a man who's worked with Masaru Emoto, the Japanese scientist who did all the beautiful scientific research on the consciousness of water
Mm-hmm.
and the implications of that. And he's continuing in that work, really devoted to the waters of the planet, because if we can look after the water, we can look after life. But it's a matter of our attitudes, our understanding of education, and of consciousness. And how do you change attitudes? That was David Suzuki's question to Bob decades ago when they taught together at a university. Bob, how do you change attitudes? And so education, I think, is key, but experiential education in a different way, so that we're not teaching concepts, we're teaching and giving experiences through all of the sense organs, and teaching children about the spirit that walks along with the physical. That's something as well that needs to happen. At any rate, this friend based in the UK who is working with the water, he is also associated with some Polynesian elders, one of whom is an elder by the name of Doc Tusi. And he essentially has said, Doc Tusi essentially has said that the future is going to be a weave between the new science and indigenous wisdom. So if we can bring those things together and have the values and the morality of indigenous wisdom, the connection to nature and to the natural laws, to the connection to the land, the connection to the spirit, the connection through the sacred relationship with all life, and some of the values that go with that, which are the indigenous values that include reciprocity. They include self-responsibility. They include kindness. They include the tenets of love, in essence, which also all fall under Granny's Law. And Granny's Law is simply the law that says the old people, the wisdom keepers, just because you're old doesn't mean you're a wisdom keeper. I might be old, but I wouldn't call myself a wisdom keeper. But the true wisdom keepers who have inherited the knowledge over lifetimes that has a legacy back to the original instructions to humanity. Those wisdom keepers have absolutely impeccable use of knowledge that includes everyone and everything. In other words, they have the discernment of knowing how to disseminate knowledge and to whom, so that it will benefit the whole of life. And we need to go back to that so that we can get off this trajectory that we're on, which has destroyed too much of the environment and too much of the spiritual, physical, mental, emotional integrity of humans, as well as all life. So let's do it for the children.
Definitely.
It's time. So these Kanyini teachings are, they echo what I grew up with. It's just a body of knowledge that has come through my husband that very simply explains the spiritual philosophy of what it means to be in the physical in a way that is very practical and very simple. And one of the things that I love is that, his last words on that video, he said, let's, go back to the soul that you came in with. So every single one of us, all creation has a spirit and has come from spirit world. And we come in and then we have this human experience. And in the human experience, very often we can be managed by the thinking mind and by the emotional mind. And we don't have those basic laws of living that keep us in check. And we also live in a world that is competitive rather than a world that honors every single one of us for the uniqueness that we come in with. Because every single bit of creation is here with an intelligence for as a purpose of being here. We all belong. But we forget that. And sometimes we forget that to reinforce that with our children. So Bob always does this exercise where he says, hold your hand out and pretend it's a mirror. Put your palm facing you and pretend it's a mirror. And let me introduce you to the most beautiful creation that was ever given to every single one of us. And then the bottom line is, how do we teach our children how to manage the authority in the world that does not have their best interest in mind, that might have, you could say that the interest is in self-gain or commercial gain or the industries that have been created or power. So, and I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know, but how do we teach our children about the soul within so that they can know and believe in who they are and then live from that place? And when you do that, there's just so much joy in the appreciation of each other's uniqueness. So do you see how growing up at Waterford Country School, you know, my playmates had, they were all uniquely different, but we were all on equal ground of joy and having fun and meeting each other where we were, wherever we were. And it's a beautiful way to live. And when I came to be in an Aboriginal community, wow. On the one hand, I've got these incredible philosophical teachings about the way it was, because my husband's teachings are about the traditional, authentic way that he grew up in. And then there's the reality of the effects of, you could say, the effects of colonization, the effects of life today, and what that means for a people who know the difference of what it means to live in connection and harmony with each other and with the land. And now they can't. They can't for many reasons. And there's so little understanding of why the disconnection is there. But I living in an Aboriginal community for 6.5 years, I understand now, coming from outside the culture, you know, why the answer to my question when I first saw the Kanyini film, why is genocide still happening? And why have I come for so long and I've never known anything about the beauty of this culture? So my husband's vision and my vision is to share a way of being so that every single one of us can then choose, you know, wow, I didn't know it could be like that. And if we know, then we can make a choice
We can
of
make
a way to be.
changes.
That's
I
right.
think people seem to forget that, but I think you just indicated, or Bob obviously come to that realization that when you go back to your soul, you know, the question now is, are you cloaked in a white body or a black body? You know, so sometimes you have to recognize the fact, and I think there's a bit of a cultural discrimination there that takes place on both sides.
Well, we could have a big long conversation about that, but I'll simplify it by saying that my husband described a traditional way of being that didn't focus on that.
Excellent.
It focused about the beauty and the place for everyone, and that's why up in Arnhem Land, where he grew up, everyone is taken in as family, because it's the family role, it's your relationship that determines your responsibility, and it's your responsibility that's important. So here's what happened in that first week when we met. We were in the back of a truck being driven somewhere, and I was sitting in the middle of between Bob on one side, and there was an Aboriginal man on the other side of me. And I vaguely remember what he said to Bob, but he basically said something like, "Oh, Uncle Bob, I don't know, maybe I should, I'm going through another breakup, you know, maybe I should just get me a good white woman or a good black woman," or whatever it was he said. And Bob said, "It's not about the color of the skin. Look here, I got me a rainbow girl."
Love
It
it.
sums it up. Very brilliant.
And literally, because he viewed everything in the combination of physical and spirit, he talked about the power of the rainbow. He talked about the meaning of the rainbow. And it's this crystalline, watery link. You know, the rainbow that you see in the sky is this crystalline, watery link between heaven and earth, between the two worlds of the physical and the spirit. And everything is made up of the wholeness of creation. And so that's what we all are. We are that. We are light beings. And you know, this dense physical, we get so caught up with the details of I'm from this culture and I'm from that culture, and you know, I don't want to pull that card, because the Kanyini teachings, his attitude, my upbringing, it goes way deeper than that.
Of course.
And that is the true heart of Aboriginal Australia, according to what he described, that when after he was taken away, that's how it is up in Arnhem Land. And I know that, you know, when I went up to, when he took me up for the funeral of his son up in Gumbalanya, and we were greeted with so much respect, so much beauty. You know, these young men who came out to meet our truck as we drove up. And they looked at Bob's daughter and they said, sorry, you can't come, you're wrong skin. And they looked at me and they said, you're right, your mother.
Yeah.
That's how simple it is. You see how simple. It's about relationship and responsibility. And then it's my job, you know, being new to the culture, to learn. Boy, did I have a learning curve.
You were on fast track, eh?
And it was because of Bob's heart of understanding and his capacity to look deeper than some of my cultural faux pas to my heart and my intention. That was a huge part of why our relationship survived in such a beautiful way.
Mm. It's been really a real pleasure listening to you and sharing the wisdom and the stories, and it's all about passing on the teachings from the ancient ones. And this is where we need to go back to our elders and storytelling and listening and sharing, which we've all, well, not all of us, but a lot of us have forgotten to do it or what to do. We've, you know, a lot of people have lost their way now with all the different things that have been going on. But, you know, it's coming back to family, is coming back to gatherings and being together and sharing and caring and talking. You know, it's just coming back to the heart. And
it is. And I'll tell you one thing that he did say to me that I have found really helpful. And this was related to grief. But it relates to every single emotion that you have. So he basically always taught that we're each responsible for our own emotions, for our thoughts, our words, our actions. And he said to me, every time you have a sad thought, you must match it with a thought of gratitude for the time we've had together. This is your work. Because in the natural order of things, everything walks together with its opposite. This will give you the internal structure from which you will do your external work of service. And you can do that with anger. You can do that with jealousy, with whatever emotions come up. But I reckon the most damaging emotion is the one where you diminish your own beauty and value and meaning and purpose to be of service. That's the one that undermine, in a world that is so full of competition, that's the one. So I think now, you know, we really need to go back to the resonance of nature, you know, with so many different opinions about, you know, the details of life that can be so confusing. Just go back to nature, because that vibration is the same vibration as creation. That's it. And that will never, ever betray or mislead. It's just very simple. We all need to do that. And then we need to allow the children who naturally do it, we need to give them access so they can continue to do that and know who they are by resonating with nature and the natural world.
Very good. So, are you going to be running like Zoom classes, or are you actually going to do physical hands-on classes now that things are starting to open up?
Look, I'll talk about any aspect of the teaching to anybody, but what I'd love to do is just to simply publish Bob's works.
Okay.
I want to publish Bob's works. I don't see myself as the workshop provider or whatever. I'd love to see my sense of it, and what I've seen, especially with the Kanyini film, is it opens up an understanding so that people begin to value Aboriginal wisdom, Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal way of thinking, whatever you want to look at it, but it changes attitudes. You know, when you value something, you look after it. And so I want to be able to publish the songs, the stories, the books, the whatever it is, the teaching programs, the bush camp program, and let that open up possibilities for Aboriginal people to step in with their nation's knowledge, their leadership, their capacity. You know, we ran a Kanyini bush camp. I say we simply. I was Bob's sidekick. But it was a Kanyini bush camp that was on the homeland just outside Uluru. And I saw the magic that happened when visitors came and sat down with a predominantly non-English speaking family and went bush and learned about making medicine, learned about hunting for maku, for witchetty grub or honey ant or whatever it was, learned about making spears and fires and cooking and all of these things. And people's lives were changed just from sitting with the family, from feeling the graciousness, from learning another way of being, and from being on that land. This is an elder at the Kanyini bush camp teaching how to make a spear. So this was the program, and this program could be happening all over this country, but I'm not the teacher. There's the teacher right there. So all I want to do is provide the materials to open eyes, open attitudes, and let it unfold in that way.
Right. So you mentioned at the start there you got a poem. Is that right?
Oh, it's a prayer, actually. Prayer. I'd love to read his prayer to the world in closing.
Yes, please.
So Bob wrote this prayer to the world, and I adapted it just in the very beginning so that this could be our prayer as well. This is the world prayer, the Kanyini world prayer. On behalf of all of us of Indigenous ancestry from the first peoples of Australia, and all of us who hold this prayer in our hearts, to all the great creators of nature who have always loved us without condition throughout all our natural life and beyond, we offer this prayer. To Mother Earth, we acknowledge with love and appreciation the care and unconditional love you provide for all living things. May we be led to understand this. May our ways of unconditional love for all life be our ways, that we live this each moment of our life. To Mother Sun, we acknowledge the light you share, living as a light of love, peace, understanding, and honoring each and every one of us throughout the world. May we understand your light as life that relates us to each other as family, so that we can be led to love each other and all living as family. May we develop ways like you, loving without judgment, that we can live love without conditions. May we learn from you to shine our light from within in service to each other and all living throughout the world to the best of our ability. To all of nature, we acknowledge and honor the life you give, the air we breathe that gives us life, and the water we drink that gives us life, the creatures we kill that give us life, the plants we take from earth that give us life. To every living thing we may not have mentioned that gives us life, we acknowledge you with appreciation and love. To all peoples of the world, we acknowledge and honor each and every one of you. May we each be responsible for the well-being of each other and all living in the ways that we think, speak, and act towards each other and each moment of our lives. May we communicate with love. May we action our interactions with the qualities of love, compassion, patience, humility, kindness, generosity, and caring, to know and understand each other. May we be love and peace, respecting the cultural beliefs of each other, that we may live with love and peace always. With love, we offer this prayer in the name of all that is sacred and holy. So let it be.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
It's a beautiful prayer. Yeah.
Right.
So have you
Oh,
got
great journey. Great
hang on,
story.
going back to your books, have you got a publisher to publish any of Bob's work?
I do have some help in that regard.
Right.
It's a matter of my own priorities and landing someplace. It would be really good to land someplace and do some work. What happened was it was life was not easy for me when Bob passed.
No.
It was quite traumatic, actually. And then I got quite unwell with mold toxicity from living in a moldy place in Queensland. And so I'm recovering from that. It's certainly, I'd love it in Tasmania. This is my kind of environment, but I'm not staying here. So it's a matter of settling and then focusing on priorities and getting it done.
Yeah.
There's so much to do. He left a huge legacy of works. You know, the Kanyini film is the tip of the iceberg, but it's a beautiful place to start. So,
I'm moving on with the prayer. Is it possible that you could type it up and share it, and we can put it out for people to share?
absolutely, yes.
Right. Brilliant.
You know, it's a very one of the things that I've learned is that knowledge is responsibility. And yet we live in a very odd world with laws. If it were Aboriginal laws, it would be no problem.
Yeah.
But the Western European legal system allows people to appropriate knowledge. And then it doesn't always get used with discernment for the good of all. And so it's a very kind of interesting position that Bob has put me in by telling me that this was going to be my responsibility. And I do it with great devotion. And but it's not an easy world to navigate because, you know, these materials have to be protected as well as produced and developed and all of that. And that requires legal understanding, which is really, it's a jungle. I'm learning.
Yeah. Aren't we all?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
but no, that prayer was lovely, and that would be a lovely one to share. You know, whenever you've got the time to do it. But thank you so much for coming and sharing. And I wish you all the luck in the world to carry his legacy on, and for all this wisdom to go out and to be shared all around the world.
Thank you, Andrena. It'll take the force of spirit to behind it to, you know, to make it all happen. And
Yeah.
I trust that. I just have to do my part, and we all do. So I so appreciate the opportunity to come onto your program. I did watch one of the podcasts that you sent, and I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated. So it's good work. I think people need good stories right now. We need good stories. You know, we've had enough of the hardship. We need inspiration now.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you for sharing your inspiration. It's been wonderful.
thank you. It's been an honor.
So just to
Thank you,
finalize,
Jeff.
we want people to go to this video, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, this film was the answer to the question, how did your mob get into such a state of hopelessness?
Okay.
So it's a good one.
All right. Thank you. Just stay tuned there while we hang on a sec. Someone's just put in a comment there. See who's that from. This particular individual wants to know how to get in touch with you. So I put up your Facebook page as a vehicle for them to touch base.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you, folks. Next week, who have we got?
Michael Lamb, I believe.
Michael Lamb. There you go. I think we could start an esoterical school between you, Barbara, and Michael Lamb. I've got to tell you.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that one.
Yeah.
It's all about connection right now.
Oh, definitely.
I tell you, last week was about rebirthing. A phenomenal response from that. I tell you, it was just amazing. Yeah. So much. Yeah, all that knowledge is coming to the surface, and I like that. Bob saying, "I've got myself a rainbow woman." Oh, it was bloody brilliant. What a great comeback. And that's what it is, isn't it? It's the rainbow tribe coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Bloody
right.
Brilliant. All right. Love yous both. And if you'd just like to stay in the green room when we finish the broadcast. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Andrena.